Hey, everybody. Before I intro the podcast today, I just wanted to announce that we have a very special guest interview today. Patrik Jarlestam, the composer of the Valheim soundtrack. And he was also kind enough to share with us one of his original songs that has never been released anywhere before this podcast. So please stick around to the very end so that you can enjoy it.
Welcome to Podheim, Jiroc's Valheim podcast. Let's give him the business.
Hey everybody, today is February 2nd, 2022. I'm your host, Jiroc the Viking, and joining me today are my fellow Vikings, Gwen the Shield Maiden.
Hi everybody.
Viking Rudy, Rudistic the Guardian.
Hello, friends.
And joining us for the first time this week is Viking Urkinis.
Hello to everybody.
And Viking Thorin, aka Metaroon.
Hey everyone.
Remember that first day you tamed a Lox and put that finely crafted saddle onto it? You probably thought, yeehaw, I can't wait to take you out and give everyone the business. Well, that's precisely how we feel today, isn't it, everyone?
Darn
yeah. Yeehaw. Sorry, the darn toot got me.
Sorry.
So first thing we want to talk about today is the anniversary of Valheim. Iron Gate released Valheim to early access 1 year ago today, and I can't believe it's been 1 year. And even I was in the beta test the year before that, and it's still a whole year gone by. I can't believe it's gone by so fast, having so much fun. What do you guys think about a whole year going by with Valheim?
Definitely a huge congratulations going out to Iron Gate, and wow, just fantastic. It's very cool.
Yeah, pretty amazing what has happened for them in the course of a year. You know, the huge explosion in popularity, the amount of players that are active, and the Game of the Year award. Quite the year for Iron Gate.
Yeah, quite the achievements and the great community they've managed to pull together around the game as well. Jiroc, the Jiroc server and community is one of them, but just as its game in general seems to attract really nice and chilled people, a very nice community. So yeah.
Yeah, it's great to see how time flies when you're running from trolls.
Well, and so Valheim also came out with some teasers today on Twitter, and they promise more all throughout February, so I'm excited to see what they come up with. But they showed a couple more images of the mountain caves, which I don't know if you guys had a chance to see it yet. I did make a video that covers the images and talks about it a little bit, but it looks like maybe we'll be able to mine crystals from the image. There's some crystals on the wall. Did any of you see that?
I didn't notice those, but I noticed the ground braziers for sure.
Yeah, and the banners. The banners on the wall as well makes me excited. I was waiting for more kind of banners and soft furnishings to put in our lovely bases.
Yeah, I hope that they make those available for us. But, you know, what they do a lot of times is they're only for the creatures to make, and not us, like all the cool bone structures that the feelings get to make. But yeah, those red curtains in that one image are really exciting. And that ground brazier looks really awesome too. And then, of course, that we saw some more. We saw another Fenring in the second image that they gave us, kind of lurking in the background. Definitely check out my other video that I made on it. And yeah, there's been a lot of talk on Twitter and YouTube and their Discord channel about, you know, when is it coming out? Some people thought it might come out this week or next week. And it seems like the real news is that they're testing it. And they did find a few things that they want to fix before they release it to the public. So we don't have an exact date, but I think we can all be patient and wait so that they get it right, and so that it comes out and it's not too buggy, and then we can actually enjoy the content. And then one of the other images they released today was a creature preview from the Mistlands. And it looks to me like a moth. And there's been some speculation about how big that moth is. We don't really have anything to compare it to in the picture. And it's just a concept art. So it's not an actual in-game picture of the moth. I'm calling it Misty Moth for now until we know what the official name is. Misty Moth.
Great name.
Yeah. And I posted over on their Discord channel that I want to see, first thing I want to do when the Mistlands comes out is to go into admin mode and put the Death Skeeto in a death match against Misty Moth and see who wins.
Yeah. Do
Moth
you
all
think we
day.
can ride? Can we ride the moth? That would be fun. Just flying around on a giant moth.
Oh, you heard it here from Gwen. Rideable moths in Mistlands.
It's such a ridiculous idea, but yeah, I'm going with it.
It's not very Viking oriented, but it's fun to pretend that maybe that's possible. And I'm sure there'll be, if it's big enough, there'll be a mod for it for that somebody can put a saddle on it and ride it around.
Oh, yeah.
All right. We have a special guest on today, the composer of the Valheim soundtrack, Patrik Jarlestam. Welcome to the podcast.
Why, thank you so much. Tack så jättemycket. It's lovely to get to be here.
We're so glad to have you, especially here on the 1 year anniversary of Valheim entering early access. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, maybe where you're from and how you started in music and becoming a music composer?
Absolutely can. I'm from Sweden. I am from the south of Sweden, from a very small town called Löddeköpinge, which just happened to be a trading mecca during Viking times. So growing up, we would have one small town over, a Viking outdoor museum, which I love to frequent. And I'm actually back here in Sweden at the moment. Nowadays, I live between Sweden and Australia, but because Australia has been in lockdown for 2 years and just recently opened up, I've been able to go back and see my friends and family. And I'm really looking forward to going back to my old hometown because they've opened up a new Viking museum there, which it just looks amazing, and it's going to be so much fun seeing it. To just give a quick backstory, I studied a lot of languages during high school. I've always loved music, but I thought, I'm going to do languages. I'm going to travel. I'm going to learn even more. And when it came to finishing high school, I didn't have any money, so I started working. And one of the best things that has happened to me is having really boring jobs from time to time, because they really make you think, what do I want to do with my life?
Oh, they do, don't they?
Oh, yes. There was one such job I had after high school that was just so boring. I decided I was going to be a composer because I wanted to compose video game music. But I applied for we call it a TAFE level pre-college sort of school. And through that, I met modern art music, or modern classical music, which was at first quite difficult to listen to. But then I got quite enamored with it. So today I write both modern classical music and I write video game music. And I've been working with video games basically since 13, 14 years ago. And it just happened to be that before 2020, when anyone who asked me, oh, have I heard any music you've made? And you just would say no, because even if you write music for a game that sells 1 million copies in one country, doesn't mean that anybody else has heard about it. But after the release of Valheim and the absolutely insane success story that it has become, people seem to know about the game, which is quite fun when you travel around and meet people who play the game in just about anywhere.
Yeah, it's interesting when you mentioned that having a boring job can make you self-reflect, especially with today's technology. We have a cell phone now. And being 49 years old myself, when I was a young person, we didn't have cell phones, so we were left with our thoughts or a book to read. And I served in the military and sort of as an engineer. And I thought when I got out of the military, I was going to become an engineer. But being in the military, a lot of times you're just sort of standing around on watch in the engine room, and usually there's not a lot going on. And I did the same thing. I was so bored out of my mind. I thought, there's no way I'm doing this when I get out of the military. I want to do something fun. And that's when I decided to become a filmmaker while working and being super bored out of my mind in the military. And so when I got out, I became a filmmaker.
So is that the recipe for a great, creative person or musician or an artist, is just do a boring job for a bit and then let the creativity take over?
Exactly. And also having, I think once we've chosen that path, I think it's important to have a job that you can just go in and do and then go home and you care about your creative side. Because I've as a freelance composer, it takes a while before you make it or have enough jobs, and you always do some side job. I've worked a lot in retail and IT, and you just go to that job, you do it, and then you go home and you think about, how do I want to make more video game music? And I'm lucky now that I live mostly off of composing music for video games and doing sound design and stuff related to music, basically. And I'm, very lucky. But it takes a while to get here, but it's a worthwhile road to travel.
So Thorin has a background in music too, and wanted to turn it over to him to tell us just a little bit about that, and then let him ask you some questions. Thorin?
Yeah, sure. Definitely not as significant as yours, Patrik, but I've been playing various instruments since I was, 12, 15 years old, something like that. Mainly guitar, but I also do some singing and bass guitar and drums and a bit of keyboard, that kind of thing.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, I kind of played in bands throughout the majority of my life, off and on. Played in one recently, but kind of took a break over COVID and haven't kicked things back up. But I play a lot of like progressive metal and kind of...
you speak my language.
Melodic, like post-rock kind of stuff. Yeah, so that's right up my alley. But that's kind of my experience, and so hoping to get a little bit more info from you and pick your brain. I'll try to keep things kind of high level, avoid getting too technical with music theory or anything like that. But figured I'd be good to be the one asking you questions.
Absolutely. I think I just want to jump in and say, the thing I find most fantastic with music as a whole is that it doesn't matter which level you're at. If it gives you pleasure, what you do musically, that's it. That's worth it. That's 100% worth it. So I do meet people who say, oh, I just play a little bit of guitar or I sing a little bit, and not at the whatever perceived level I would be at. And I feel it doesn't matter. If that makes you happy, then it's worth it. If it doesn't make you happy, then we can talk about changing that. But no, I think that everybody can meet at any level in music, and it's one of the greatest communication languages there are. I love it.
Yeah, completely agree. There's so much emotion that can be conveyed in music, and as long as you're vibing for it, then it's a great thing. Obviously, you need to reevaluate if it becomes a chore or anything like that, but it's a great way to express creativity and kind of let your brain wander sometimes. And it's a good way to spend time, that's for sure.
Oh yeah.
So one question I had for you, just to kick things off, you say you're a music composer and you do a lot of sound design. Do you also play live as well, or are you just kind of composing at home for work? How does that go?
I used to play more live, and I think it's been an important part of me. I started off playing a bit with my dad's band, and they played 1960s instrumental music while at home, and that was sort of my impetus to learn an instrument. And then, of course, really loving metal, wanted to get into that. But it was hard finding people. I'm coming from a small town. So when we moved to a bigger town, I joined a band and we played covers, and then became a disco cover band, which was absolutely fun. I mean, that's the thing, just playing, I was like on Boogie Wonderland, Earth, Wind and Fire, the September. So like those kinds of songs, there's just so much joy in playing them. And sort of, I've been a sort of self-taught musician. I did take lessons, but I was more along just playing guitar and learning things on my own and what I could off the internet. So when I started to study composition, I felt that I wanted to really get into learning an instrument to sight read and to read music, because that was something I had never really practiced before, done much of. So I did play percussion growing up and guitar. So I thought I'd go into percussion, because writing for percussion, if you're not a percussion player, is hard to do that really well. I felt so. I took percussion as a second instrument lessons when I was at music university in Stockholm, and I did play more modern art music stuff around then. And I think it's really important for musicians or composers to see that side. How is it to be on the other side of receiving someone else's score that you're not familiar with, you don't know how it works or the feel of the piece immediately, because you spend so much time with your own pieces that you know them by heart. But funnily you asked that, because I'm actually going to play, I'm going to make a guest appearance at a concert in Stockholm in April, the 2nd of April, where it's a video game concert, and I think a third of the concert is going to be a medley of Valheim music, and I'm going to be playing guitar on that live. And it's actually been more than 2 years I've been on stage, so I'm looking forward to this one. I'm going to bust out and low-tuned 7-string guitar and play some of the boss metal tracks from Valheim.
Yes, like their soundtrack.
Exactly.
Very cool. Yeah, that should be fun. Neat to be able to see, video games live in person. I've never heard of a concert like that before where you get to go see video game music live. I mean, I've heard it for movie scores. I don't think I've encountered it for video games. That's very good. Very good idea. Where is that and what's it called, just for anybody who's interested?
It's in Stockholm, and I think it's Sounds from Our Save Files is the title of the concert, and it's going to be played at a concert venue called Musikaliska, which is a big concert house in Stockholm. So I think it's the 2nd of April. So I think with Sounds from Our Save Files, you'll be able to find that. We've been lucky in Sweden that we've taken inspiration from the American video game classical music concerts and made quite a lot of them here in both close to my hometown and in Stockholm and Gothenburg. So there's a good tradition. I think it's in a way, I would say that more than what's called modern classical music or modern art music, I feel like movie music and video game music is like the new forefront of modern classical music, because it brings in an audience that otherwise wouldn't go as much to the concert halls. And I think it's I love classical music, I love heavy metal, and I love new music. So I think that it's important to show young generation that the concert houses are for them as well, not just a stodgy traditionalist institution that plays the old classics. But I think there should be an exchange between the two. Play something new, play something old, show the links, because there are so many links between where that music comes from and what we compose today.
Yeah, definitely. It takes so much inspiration. And there are so many progressive artists that are starting to get into making music for games and that kind of thing. Like, I don't know if you're aware of Misha Mansour from Periphery.
Absolutely.
Yeah, he does a ton of really cool stuff that's so orchestral. And I know he's done a couple soundtracks for a few different video games, or a few songs at least. And the crossovers are very cool.
I just wanted to interject too, Patrik, that as a filmmaker through the years, my biggest exposure and what made me sort of fall in love with, sort of the classical music style was, movie soundtracks. And over the years, I've collected, probably 100 movie soundtracks, before I could download anything from the internet. I have some soundtracks from some games over the years that do the same thing to kind of fill that love of the classical music style. That's something different than your pop music and whatnot.
No, there's so many good soundtracks, and it's also an interesting link with a lot of people who've played in bands previously. I mean, Hans Zimmer is a good example of who has a illustrious career playing in bands before, and there are a couple of other ones which I can't remember off the top of my head, but I think that especially a lot of heavy metal progressive people have yearned for that big sound. How do we take metal and add the timbral sound possibilities of the classical world with that? I know a Swedish band, Pain of Salvation, made an absolutely fantastic record where they wrote it for small chamber orchestra and heavy metal band, and really integrated all the parts in the writing process. And it's music that really works. And I think that love for music, it just shines through in so much of what people are trying to do today.
So one of the questions that I had for you too, being a filmmaker, was, have you done any music for short films, independent filmmakers, or do you have any interest in it? I find in one of the, I've taught filmmaking because I've been doing it for about 25 years, and screenwriting and whatnot. And what I try to remind people, the young filmmakers, is that to not overlook the soundtrack for your project. You can write a really good screenplay, you can shoot it beautifully, you can have really good actors, but music is, I consider music to be half the storytelling experience, because without the right music, you can really miss the mood and the story that you're trying to tell. And some of my favorite movies really do a great job of music complementing the story. Do you have any interest in that, or have you done it before?
Absolutely. I am very interested in it. When I studied, I did work with animators doing animated shorts, and worked on one. I didn't do the music for it, but I did the mixing and like the final Foley edit for a short movie. Well, I found that it's very rarely the same type of people who work in video games and who work in movies. So my contact network, just because I was interested in it, and I sorted out skewed heavily towards video games, and most of my immediate family and most of my friends here work in video games, so it was easy to make those connections. I don't have the connections to work with short movies or movies, but I would love to, and I just don't know where to start. That's the problem. So if anybody's hearing this and out there and would like to work together or look at working together and what that would mean, hit me up, because I would love to do some more of that. There's so many meeting points between video game music and movie music when it comes to storytelling, and storytelling through music has been my core thing throughout all of the games I've worked on.
Jiroc is taking notes right now. Jiroc is like, yep, okay, sorted, next soundtrack.
Exactly. Well, what I was going to say too is that when I was a young filmmaker, the way that I would always get music if I couldn't find a library, which, never really is the exact mood for the story. You're just trying to make it work. But I would find composers by posting on various forums where I knew composers hang out. Here in the San Francisco area, Craigslist is huge. And so I would use that to look for composers. And I was very lucky. I found quite a few composers that were interested in composing for movies. And so over the years, when I get young composers asking how do they break into the music industry, I tell them connect with the college and or young filmmakers doing an independent project, because then that project, especially if that project end up like Valheim, gets exposure, then suddenly you get exposure. And if that filmmaker goes to do bigger projects, then obviously they have you as a contact. But that's one way. And I do know people who have, advanced over the years that way, but, and not always. Sometimes you're just working with an independent filmmaker who has a passion for a project, but you do have to scrutinize those ones that you work with for little to no pay for those low budget projects. As I'm sure, as a filmmaker, I know I get approached by people all the time for the low budget projects. And I'm sure as a composer, maybe you've dealt with a little bit of that, if not now, maybe earlier in your career.
It's an interesting thing that this is not talking necessarily from experience of the movie world, but there are a lot of small projects in the video game world that have gotten lucky and you've made money off of. I've done the soundtrack for 5 small games where the idea was I'm not going to get anything paid up front, and it's percentages of sales, and 4 out of those 5 have made it. So wow. I was paid up to 4 to 5 times the time I put into making them. And that's not something I've heard about working the same in the movie world, but it might, because I said it's not a world I inhabit, but I'm intending to do that. I'm working on, so I regularly work together with a colleague called Malin Håkansson, and she's a fantastic sound designer, and she's more pop oriented in her music. So together, she's very catchy, and I'm the orchestral one. So, and my melodies work really well for long games, and she's really good at like the catchy, get in your head type melodies. And we've recently started collaborating with another composer in Australia who's more in the jazz genre, and she's also working towards the movie industry there. So yeah, it's something I'm looking to get into more, because I think it's all about storytelling, and I love it. I love storytelling, whatever the project.
Yeah,
That's really interesting.
Oh, go ahead, Gwen.
No, I was just going to say, just picking up on the fact that you obviously work and collaborate with various musicians and people from all over the world. And one of the questions I had for you was around your own background, and obviously you're Scandinavian, but you spend time in Australia. How do you take those influences and translate those different cultures into your music?
This is a very interesting one, and I can sort of relate it to Valheim, because when I grew up, I was in what's called the Free Air Appreciation Society. If you translate it literally, it's Friluftsfrämjandet for all you Swedes out there. But it's basically like the Scouts, but a Scandinavian version with no badges. And so I grew up walking around in forests and camping, and I've felt very intimately connected with nature through being able to go anywhere I felt. And that really helped me with Valheim, because I was when I got the Valheim gig, I was stuck in Australia because of the lockdown, and we weren't even allowed to leave the country. And so sitting in hot Australian summer trying to conjure up how it feels walking around in the Scandinavian birchwood forest, I was really lucky that I knew so much of my childhood had been there, so I could conjure up how does it feel. And I feel like the Meadows song is my it's my love letter to those forest walks. So when you hear that song, that for me is walking in a birch forest. It really hit the spot for what I wanted to say. But I think it's about immersion into the culture. And in Australia, I've picked up going on, it's called bushwalks, because you go into the bush instead of you go into a forest by word, and trying to get into nature there. I do a lot of gardening and planting and trying to learn native plants. So I had that connection to nature, but also I play together with an Aboriginal man whose name is Michael Burke, and he's Yagle man, Yagle Nation, being from around Maclean in New South Wales. And through him, I get connected to his culture and his understanding of Australia, and I feel like he's my brother guide to the country and a deeper understanding and learning. And also I want to give a shout out to the wonderful Philippa Murphy-Haste, who's my partner, and the musician who plays on Valheim. She plays the clarinet and she plays the viola. And she has guided me and made me aware and understand a lot of the complexities of life and culture in Australia. And I'm really thankful for all of that. And it's still a learning process. It's always going to be, but that's really fun. So sort of to summarize, I like getting into the thick of it, and you just have to go out and meet people and see things to immerse yourself in the culture, and that's the only way. And I'm lucky to get to be between two such incredibly interesting cultures.
Absolutely. It just blows my mind how people like you can take feelings and emotions and memories and just turn them into something that will recreate that emotion into someone else. It's fascinating. And I saw that you also have some music that you have on your website around Scandinavian architecture. And that is another thing that blows my mind. How do you translate architecture into music? And I listen to the tracks and it's like, oh my God, it does work. But maybe you can talk a bit about that and explain the concept behind that Scandinavian architecture music that you composed.
Yes, this is one of my passion projects, which I compose for concert music. So that's my modern art music. I've delved into a lot of folk music, both liking it from when I was young, but then when I was at a music university as well, I did take a course in kulning, which is a Swedish folk music female singing tradition where you call out for your herd of cows. And it's really cool because it's a technique that women do and men can sort of imitate it. But I did do a course in that to understand the music and where it comes from. It's fascinating. And through that, I felt with Valheim, I'm inspired by Swedish and Scandinavian folk music all around. But what I wanted to do with the architecture pieces is I wanted to see if I could translate how it feels, take aspects of architecture that makes it feel like we're in a Scandinavian dwelling, and translate that more literally into music in order to find a new Scandinavian expression of music that's not folk music, it's not art music, but it's somewhere in between. So I bought a book and looked at a different really cool architecture around Scandinavia, and then I took aspects of that. For example, there's a monastery, the Cistercian monastery in Norway, and it's very hard stone walls, stone slabs that sort of like interlocked like lizard skin on the outside, and on the inside there's it's light, it's a pine wood, it's very woody and nice, but almost Viking-esque building, but in a modern take on it. And so I thought I'd take the warmth of the inside and the comforting feeling of being in there and put that as an opposite to what happens when you're out there in the cold and you see this almost fortress-like dwelling in front of you, and then going in between those two states. That was my first piece I tried doing that with, and also integrating a couple of rhythms I picked up from Swedish folk music. But it's really fun because it takes you places and it makes music that you wouldn't think of. And I think that's the music I've made, which is farthest away from what I usually do. And that was really fun. It's still me, but it's a new version of what I could make. And so I've done Scandinavian forest music as well, where I go out into Swedish forests and improvise music, just trying to be in the forest and feel how it feels there. And there's a musician who's recorded that piece, Scandinavian Forest 1, which is going to be released on video soon. She sent me the the test make of that video today, and actually haven't even watched it yet. So that I have that to look forward to after this podcast.
Thorn, did you have another question for him?
Yeah, I was just gonna say I trying to like articulate the feeling that you get from like a cold stone building or a warm wooden interior. It's pretty phenomenal that you're able to do that so well. I've got to ask though, are you able to imitate the cow call for us?
I can. It's very loud and it's not very great because it's a skill you have to keep up. But I'll do a try at the end of this podcast. The thing is, when you do it well, it is incredibly loud. The people who are really good at it can reach up to around 100 decibels.
Oh wow!
With it, so at the moment it's 9:31, which means that I might have 29 minutes left to be able to do it. So I will get back to that one a little bit later and see what we can do.
All right, no worries. I'll try to remember to come back.
Well, yeah, so of course we wanted to move over to discussion of Valheim. Erkinis, do you want to start us off with a question for Valheim?
Yeah, so do you play Valheim yourself? Have you played it?
Yes, it's quite fun.
Nice. How often do you happen to play it?
I used to play it more before, but not as much. Like, I mean, I'm composing new music for the game at the moment, so now I'm playing it and running around and testing things. But I think I've played maybe 50, 60 hours of it. It's really fun for me because I have so many friends in Sweden and Australia who actively play it. I have friends who've done 600 to 800 hours in the game. So I get the luxury of getting to join their servers and see the stuff that they've constructed there. Funnily enough, my friends, none of them really play survival games. So we're playing another game that's become our favorite, which is also Coffee Stain Studios published one called Deep Rock Galactic, which is made by a Danish company. And we're really enjoying that one. And I've also been playing Diablo 2 a bit with my sister. But it's, yeah, no, I've got to find more friends to play Valheim with, I feel. Maybe when we get the new music out, I'll have to get some more friends on board.
Join us on Jiroc servers. We'd love to have you.
I would love to join you. Let's book it.
Yeah. We have about 130 players playing on my various servers right now and continuing to grow. It's been pretty exciting. But I was going to ask you.
Well done.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about if you're still doing music for Valheim's, because I assume that with their new content and their new biome updates that'll be coming all the way through the release, if you were involved in that, and it sounds like you are, and I'm sure you can't tell us much about it, but I just was going to be a question of mine.
That is the shame. I can't really say that much. I'm on, like, that's the thing. I have a really good working relationship with the team at Valheim, and it's worked out really well to work together. So we do enjoy doing that, and I hope to get to continue with it for as long as we all enjoy working with each other. As to what's coming up, fun things.
Yeah,
that's all I can say.
Yeah.
It's really what I really like at the moment is that I know the music of Valheim. It's a very, not just that it's a part of me musically, but when I've never had the luxury before of getting to work for so long on a game that I now get to come back with the knowledge of what I've done before and add more and make it evolve. And that's a very luxurious feeling.
Yeah.
So going off of that, how did you get connected with Iron Gate and making the music for Valheim?
Yes, I'll try to make a very long story as short as possible. My brother-in-law used to teach at a video game academy here in the south of Sweden, and they, together with Coffee Stain Studios, they arranged a VR game jam, and I was the only one there making music and sound. So I worked on a couple of the projects, and one of the projects I worked on won, which meant I got to speak to Coffee Stain Studios. And then several years later, because I had a friend in high school who had worked for Funcom, later on he started his own video game company, which wanted to make, it was a VR game called The Eye of Odin VR. It was just when VR was burgeoning. So I made Viking music for that. And because I'd done that, when Coffee Stain later came back and asked me, do I know of like Viking metal stuff and have you done anything like that? I could send them that, and that put me in contact with the team. And we did some tests and worked together for a short while to see if we would be a good fit. And we were. So they chose to commission music from me. So that's how it's all roundabout ways of getting into it. But it just happens to know that you never know who's going to be a good contact and lead to something else. That's my takeaway. You can never know what's going to be really good and influential and easy or lead your career forward. Even at this point, I'm negotiating with another company that contacted me because they heard a podcast that a game designer does, and he's super interested in video game music. So he interviewed me about how I work with music for a game called Lake Ridden, and because this new company had heard me on that podcast, they contacted me. So you never know. So you just have to be out there and get to know heaps of people. And it's really good that I really love people, and I think meeting people is the most fun thing ever. So that's how it's all connected.
Yeah, I would have to say that for the film industry and probably most people in the in one of the artistic endeavors, the sort of the same. You need to make contacts. You need to be open to meeting people. You can't really succeed as an artist, musician, filmmaker, whatever it be, if you're kind of the one who likes to just work on your stuff locked away and not communicate with people. So when when I give filmmakers advice, and it sounds like it's similar for composers, get out there and meet people. Hey everyone, this episode is sponsored by G-Portal. They host all of my servers, and I have to say they are pretty awesome. If you're looking to rent your own gaming server, you can save 5% if you use my link in the description.
My take away from life has been that it's the people who you think are going to be your best contacts are never your best contacts. It's always the people you haven't thought about. So keep an open ear, an open eye, and build bridges with anyone who's nice.
Yeah, so getting back to motivation or inspiration, regarding Valheim, where do you draw the inspiration from?
I would say having seen a lot of these things. I mean, I grew up in a small town called Löddeköping, and just one of the fields on the outskirts of the town, there was a Viking burial chamber. And having all of these things that are Viking-based around us and growing up with hearing and reading about them. When I visited my friend who's also a fantastic composer in Latvia, we went and visited her parents in the countryside, and on their farm property, there's a Viking ship burial mound. So I feel like it's all encompassing here. And if I can go on a bit of a tangent, I think we've taken care of our sort of Viking heritage quite well here in Scandinavia, because it's the culture that I'm part of. I know that, of course, we have people who are Sami in the north of Sweden, and I don't know much about that culture yet, but I'm very eager to learn more about that. But I want to put it into perspective with, for example, Aboriginal culture, which in Australia, which is for many people doesn't get the recognition, and people don't take an active interest in as much as I think should, because I find it incredibly interesting and fascinating and smart and wise and all of the things above. And which is why I want to learn more about it, because I think there are some fantastic people there and there's a fantastic culture. But yeah, I think it's having lived in a country where that has been part of the history going back, and having seen all of these things growing up, all of the Viking burial mounds and burial chambers, and it feels sort of like home in a interesting way.
Yeah, nice to be able to pull from your own experiences and memories and all that good stuff.
So yeah, exactly. It's like you're already immersed into the culture and the lore, so it's you building upon that, doing more of it.
I'd love to know a little bit more about your writing and recording approach. Like you've spoken about a lot of different instruments, whether it's you playing guitar or the I forget what you said, flute or clarinet or one of those. But I'm just curious how much of the soundtrack is like digital instrumentation using VSTs or something else, or whether you are recording real instruments for a lot of the tracks.
Whenever I can, I love recording real musicians, because whenever I say that, it makes me think, what's an unreal musician? But I like recording musicians because they add their own personalities into it. My approach when writing art music is that I don't necessarily write for an instrument. I write for the person playing that instrument, which means that you try to incorporate how they play, which techniques they do, what makes them an interesting musician. And I noticed that when I've written for friends who are guitarists or lute players, and me being a guitar player myself for most of my life, that techniques that I've put time into learning might not be what they've done. They might know other things really well. And that taught me that I have to write for them, who they are as people and how they play. And one of the first soundtracks I did was for a game called Mortal Online, which has now released its second game, which I'm not composing for. But for that game, I had read about the approach that if you have no money, well, then you have to use what you have. If you have a lot of money, you use real orchestras and stuff. But if you have somewhere in between, try to record all the melodic stuff, the stuff that's really important. Try to record that with real musicians. Because even if you have a VST backing, if you have a live musician up front, you will accept anything that's behind. It becomes like a backing track to the melody. And I took the same approach with Valheim, recording all the French horn solo parts, recorded by the wonderful Michael H. Dixon, who's a fantastically accomplished French horn player and composer in his own right. He's an Australian. Jinian Lee plays the cello parts on the soundtrack, and then Philippa Murphy-Haste plays clarinet and viola. We had quite a quick turnaround with the whole soundtrack, so it was all sort of done. When I got the commission, 4 months later, the whole soundtrack was done. So it was down to 3 hours before the absolute final deadline when everything had to be in the game. 3 hours before that, I was finished and got it in, and I think the game was released the next day.
Oh wow!
So it was really on the finishing line. And since I play percussion, I'd love to play more percussion for the continuation of the soundtrack, and that's something I'm going to put time into. And I'd love to get more real instruments. I have a flair for harps. I think they're fantastic instruments. I love recorders and old flutes. The older the instrument, the better. So here's a little fun tidbit. On almost every soundtrack where it's possible and applicable, I try to hide either an arch flute or a theorbo. And for anybody who knows about them, they're fantastic instruments. If you look at old Renaissance paintings and you see this sort of guitar-like lute, it's called a tenor lute, with the bent headstock. If you take that and add a almost 2 meter long extra neck for bass strings, that's what a theorbo or an arch lute looks like. You look them up; they're fantastic. But it's nice because when you want to add bass to a track, the classical thing is to use a double bass or use any of the woodwind bass instruments, bass clarinet, contrabass, bassoon. And that's great, but that's a sound that most of us know. And you can't really add an electric bass because that sound is quite different from an acoustic sense. But with the theorbo or the arch lute, you have basically plucked bass strings. So you can add this very analog, real-worldy feel to the song that I feel like almost no other instrument does. So that's in the Meadows track. It's in the home track, and I think I might have hidden it in another track as well, but I'm losing which one that is at the moment. But yeah, the more I can record musicians, the better, and I'd love to, going forward, to record even more. But it's a combination of VSTs, because when you work with video games, there's usually you're contracted quite late in the process. And with Valheim, I think talks started about 7 months before the release date. And so if you as a composer, want to show the game designers or the company that you can do what they want or need, you need to be able to deliver almost the final quality of the sound of the music immediately, because that's what you discuss. When you talk with people who are not from the music industry, you need to develop a language that you can talk about it. It doesn't have to be that you use the correct terms, but just so you know, if the boss would say, there's too little energy in this track, you need to understand what are they actually talking about? What is energy for them?
Yeah, for sure. And if they're listening to a demo or something, then they're not going to get the same like evocative feel as if it's properly mixed or mastered or that kind of.
Exactly, because what they're listening to is finalized music. It's mixed and mastered music, so that's what they're used to. And if you present something that's, say, for the sake of the argument, if you present MIDI music to them, that's going to sound so far from what they want you to have made in the end that might put them off working with you. That's my experience. So I try to have really good sounding VSTs and record what I can myself to make it sound really good from the start. Because what you get with having music that sounds close to the end product already means that you have something that you can actually talk about, you can show. For example, if a producer would say, "Oh, there's not enough like energy in this," and then I could increase the bass and say, "Is this the energy that you mean?" Or you add some more instruments to thicken the orchestration, or is this the energy you mean? And you have a working mold that you can talk about even if you don't have the same language yet. But that's what I always start with when I work on a new video game project, how to talk about music together and how to learn what the words mean between each other so that we can work together efficiently and have fun instead.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and that's why I was asking too, because there's so much work that goes into getting like a fully, mixed and mastered recording of original instruments, and some of the like plugins and tools can allow you to tweak things so quickly, just on the dime, during a conversation. And I'm sure those can help with the writing process. That's been kind of a big evolution in the music world over the last 10 years or so. So it's just kind of
Absolutely.
Curious. Do you have any favorite like VST plugins or tools or anything that's maybe a little bit technical, but just out of curiosity?
No, I absolutely do. I used to work a lot with East-West Quantum Leap symphonic orchestra samples. The thing is, I want to say that with VSTs, they can be absolutely great and they can sound great if you use them for what they're good at. And what I mean by that is, if you work with a live musician and you tell them to play something that's not in their repertoire, not something they practiced, it's not going to sound good usually. But if you write for them and do the stuff that they're good at and they know, they're going to do great. Same with VSTs, actually. So every new VST I try, or the ones I use, I don't try to make them do what is necessarily in my head initially, but I try to explore what can I do with this VST that it sounds good with. For example, the classical one with strings is legato, how to make legato playing sound good. And there's a couple of sample libraries where, the legato does not sound good, but they do a couple of other things really well. And if you build up your bass with a fair number of them, you can use them for what's really good and mix them together. I work a lot with Kontakt instruments, Native Instruments Kontakt, because it's a great base of just anything. I bought one which is called Nordisk Contrabass, which is basically everything you can do with a contrabass. That's extended techniques and fun and interesting, quirky things. It's great for adding that instrument on top of classical VST double bass libraries and get something new out of it. I've also bought Sinister Strings, their complete string library, because a good friend of mine, the Swedish movie music composer Karzan Mahmoud, who's a lovely person, and I asked him, because he works with a lot of really big Swedish movies, and like, what do you recommend? And he said, absolutely, get this one. So I did. And what else I use? Storm drums. I use a lot of different small percussion libraries. I almost never work with loops, but I do sometimes work with percussion loops, which sounds funny because I play percussion myself. But the thing is that percussion loop can have been made by so many layers of processing that if I'm going to take percussion from scratch and then make it sound like a loop that's been processed with several layers, I sometimes don't have the time. So I use them, but I always layer them with my own stuff and versions of other things. So I would say every layer has at least 4 or 5 instruments in them that make them the final one, if there's space for that.
Okay, cool. Yeah, lots of good ones there. And yeah, the ability to kind of mix and match or layer things to kind of create your sound is always a good approach to take, and being able to quickly swap out beats to try different accents for a piece and different syncopation and that type of thing can really change the feel. So nice to be able to do that really quickly. So I totally get where you're coming from there.
Exactly. And some pieces you just have to sit with, and some pieces you just have to sit with an instrument and improvise until you get something. The Meadows track is an example of that. I tried just sitting with an acoustic guitar, improvising until I felt like this is how it sounds. It feels and sounds in my mind. And then I started layering instruments on top of each other, and that created that track. So that was just from an acoustic guitar. Yes, I do play acoustic guitar on the whole soundtrack, and mandolin.
Very cool.
Maybe I play something else. But yeah.
I was going to ask you about the acoustic guitar line on the Meadows track. Actually, that's one of my favorites, and we're going to get pretty quickly to everybody's favorite track. But I love that song. It's super peaceful, but the guitar part it seems super mathy. I was trying to figure out what time signature it was, and I couldn't figure if it was like 4/4 with a stutter or 9/8 or what is that in?
It's different layers of timings, actually. Okay. Just a funny side story about that guitar. The guitar that starts off the Meadows track is a guitar that's been backed over by a car once, because it's my partner's guitar that happened to once. So it sounded good, but not great. But it was the only guitar I had at that time when starting to compose the soundtrack. So if you listen to the B part of the soundtrack, that's when I bought a better acoustic guitar. So you get like the progress from backed over guitar to nice sounding guitar. But they both have character, so I like them both. So the original guitar part of the A part of the Meadows song has the feel of bum bum ba dum bum 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 ba da. So there's sort of a 6/8 feel, because I wanted to go for something that was very folk musically and sort of dancey, and I like the slowness, the contemplative nature of that line, while the mandolin part is in 12/8. Boom bam bam boom ba boom ba dum ba da ba da 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 da 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 da. Or is it 9? 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 da 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 da. Oh, it's in 9/8. Okay, mandolin is in 9. Yeah. Cool. So they don't loop necessarily, but they do. They have a similar sort of triplet or 6 or 9 feel, but loop at different points. And I like that superimposition. And then you have the harp and the theorbo, which are added to that. And the thing I wanted to do, I wanted to make a chord progression that wasn't clearly major or clearly minor, because I thought that would be too much of a on-the-nose feel as you start the game. So the chord is a 7 sus4. I forget if it's an A7 sus4 it begins in. So there's no thirds in the guitar, in the mandolin, or the theorbo, but the harp does arpeggio runs that do play the major or the minor third in the chords in the A part. So you get that very hidden in the background, and it's not really apparent where
it's kind of open-ended
third comes from. Yeah, exactly. And that's what I wanted to achieve, and I felt I did.
Yeah, you definitely killed it. It's very cool having such like a peaceful tune, and it's so relaxing, but there's so much complexity to it at the same time. So yeah, you did a great job with it.
I think that's when it works, when you hide the complexity. I like this is something I sort of took from Studio Ghibli and Spirited Away, which is one of my favorite movies of all time. He said, Miyazaki, that the movie works on so many levels. One level is that kids can see it and they will find it fascinating and fun. Grown-ups can see it and also enjoy it. And then you can analyze the movie and see all of these hidden things that make the world connected and work. So you have 3 levels of it working on. And that's what I try to do with my music as well, that people who aren't musicians can listen to the music and get something out of it that they enjoy. It could be the melody, it could be the rhythm, it could be the energy. And people who are musically interested and can listen to it and find, oh, that's an interesting chord there. I didn't expect it to go there. Or, oh, that happened in an odd time signature. And then I also want it to be interesting for the musicians to play, which is the biggest challenge. But when you make multi-layered music, there's always something you can do to make it interesting for the musicians. So I try to, don't want them to have boring jobs. I want them to have fun jobs.
So Patrik, this is really fascinating, this stuff you're talking about. So, a little bit of the music stuff is over my head, but I remember working with composers and some of that stuff sounds familiar. If we talk about the Valheim soundtrack itself, when I listened to it, like when I first started playing the game, one of the first things I did was I went to YouTube and I looked up to see if anybody had the full Valheim soundtrack on there. And then I would just listen to it throughout the day, because I do love listening to soundtracks, movie soundtracks, video game soundtracks. And when I listened to the soundtrack, I thought to myself, wow, there are a lot of very different styles of music here. And I know, composers can do, different styles. They don't have to be, stuck in one type of style. But if you look at back at the Valheim soundtrack yourself, if you had to choose one song that was your favorite, for whether it be the story behind it, the people you worked with, or the process or just the sound? Is there like one song that you would like say, this is the one that I really enjoy?
I'll have to pull up the set list from my files and look at what do I really like. The thing is, I used to joke before moving to Australia that my life was so good, I was probably never going to compose any great music. And my mum passed away at the beginning of 2020 from cancer, and she was one of the most important people in my life. Absolute fan of the arts, fantastic woman, fantastic mother. And I was composing a Requiem at that time, and we sort of half finished. And when after she passed away, I finished the piece and dedicated it to her. And I'm incredibly happy with that music turned out, because that music for me really, I hit all the things I wanted with that music. And as a composer, I feel, for me at least, very seldom you do that. You might compose some music and then you feel like, oh, the third movement there is great, or oh, that chord progression is really nice, but that was a bit of a stretch, that thing, or that didn't work. But with the Requiem, it's that I've managed to do all the things I wanted to do and make music that moves me. And I think that's as good as you can do as a composer. You make music that moves you yourself, and you forget that you composed it, and you're enveloped in the feelings of the music. And just after I finished the Requiem, Valheim came, and it felt like, yeah, there was something really difficult that did happen in my life that gave me the inspiration and just lifted all of these things up and created a great soundtrack. So I'm incredibly happy with every single piece of music in Valheim. And I also want to give a shout out to the CEO of Iron Gate, Rickard Svensson, because of his way of understanding what he wanted for the game. Because we have two tracks, the sailing music and the mountain music, where he didn't give up on what it was he wanted. He didn't know exactly what it was, but he knew it when we heard it. And we did go, like both of those songs, we made 5 completely separate ideas for each of those tracks. And I would say the sailing music wouldn't have been as good if he wasn't tenacious, like, no, we've got to get that, we've got to get this really right. And so I think with the collaboration between his vision and what I delivered in the end, I think we did something that was really good. But if I have to choose.
You have to choose.
I have to choose, exactly. I think it's easy to choose the hits. And of course, Meadows and Sailing are the hits. But my absolute favorite is Mildor Protects, the 4th boss music. And it is because I love vocals. I think human voice is a great instrument. And I very rarely use it in video games, because when you use the voice, it means something. Our brains are tuned to listen to it, especially if there's vocals to it. So I use it, when I do use it, either in a choiristic way. I used to sing a lot in choirs, and I love that sound. We have some great choirs in Sweden or the Scandinavian countries, but you have even better ones in the Baltic states, the Estonian choirs, the Latvian, Lithuanian choirs. Amazing singers, world class. And so I've gone to, I haven't gone to any concerts with them, but I've listened a lot to the Baltic choirs, and that is in the back of my mind, how to use it. So I feel like Mildor Protects, that choir singing is based off of Swedish choir music and Baltic choir music. But I really love the second part with the violin. That melody is so emotive, and it is the mother that protects her child. And I think it's impossible to say that wouldn't have been influenced by what happened to my mother passing away, that there isn't a part of that is a love for my mum. I do have a hidden Easter egg. This Easter egg does not exist yet in Valheim. I'm hoping to get it implemented, and we'll see if I get it. It might never happen, but I'm hoping to make some type of tribute to lost ones, especially through this time that we've been going through. And we'll see. We'll see if someone finds it in the game and if it becomes reality one day. I can't promise anything, but it will be fun to have that happen.
Well, it's interesting what you said about, well, I say Richard, but Rikard Svensson and your collaboration, and then talking about living your life and tragedy and loss influencing, especially artists. I remember when I worked with composers on some of my independent projects, it was very similar in that I knew when they would present a song to me that they were working on, I immediately either knew it fit or I immediately knew it didn't fit. And it's just interesting how there's so much emotion wrapped up in the way that music sounds, that if it does fit the emotion of what you're trying to do, you know it as the creator, so I can relate to that. But also in the film industry, especially screenwriting, probably more so screenwriting, when there's people who especially young people, and they write a screenplay and they ask me, well, how do I make this better? Can you give me feedback? One of the things I just tell them is if you haven't, you're young, you probably haven't had a lot of tragedy, depending on your life and your upbringing. Personally, I did come from kind of a very poor family with a lot going on. But I would say get out and live your life and meet people and have experiences, good and, maybe some bad things in your life happen. And if the bad things do happen, that's when you really want to sit down and pour the emotion onto the page. So I would tell screenwriters and maybe now composers, if I meet them, if something bad happens, you're going to lament and you're going to go through that process of mourning, but use it. Find a positive way to spin it and work on your art, because when you're really emotional like that, it seems to bring out some really, really interesting ideas.
I think you're absolutely right, and I would say that maybe the Valheim soundtrack, because it was written when I was in Australia and I was in lockdown, is my love note to Scandinavia, my longing for home, being homesick and missing my family. And even though we're incredibly lucky that today we can play games together, we can online, we can call each other on FaceTime, even if it's not the same as sitting in the same room and sharing a beer, it's still better because, like for example, my partner's grandmother came out from England together with her husband, and she just longed for home, to see home again, and sadly she passed away in Australia before she could see home. And I know that I can travel back, but it was a while where I couldn't. And yeah, I think Valheim soundtrack is my love note to where I come from and my heritage and my culture. And it's fantastic to get to be back in it as well, and drink Swedish coffee and eat Swedish sandwiches with cod paste, caviar and cheese and all of that fun stuff. It's fantastic. It's where I come from. I'm never going to lose that. I'm going to just embrace it and love it even more. Because I think that this is a side story, but I think it's an important one. Because I lived for a short time in Iraq, in Kurdistan, in Suleimania, and fantastic people there, the Kurds. And they're very proud of their country, very proud of their culture. And as a Swede, for a long time, I felt I was taught that you can't be very proud of yourself as a Swede, because that would mean that you're inadvertently xenophobic. But I felt living together with the Kurdish people that they were so proud of their culture that if I wasn't proud of my culture and the good things that I come from, I couldn't meet them in where they came from. So I felt I wanted to develop a sense of being proud of being Swedish in order to meet people. And I feel like I've developed a way of being proud Swedish that makes me able to invite people in and make them feel welcome and heard and understood. And I think that's such an important part of being a human today in the 21st century, but 2022, that we need to invite each other. We need to be caring now more than ever, definitely. And I'm very proud. I'm a proud Swede. I'm proud of where I come from. I recognize the problems that we do have here, but that also makes me able to go in and meet people where they're from.
Yeah, that's a wonderful outlook to have on things. I know that America being such a big influence on the world, that it has both positive and negative influences. And I'll even hear Americans sometimes when they hear the bad side of America and its influence overseas. I try to tell them sort of a similar message to, I think, what you were saying. And it's that, we do have our problems too, but instead, try to focus on the positive, and be kind to others, and share the good with them so that they can see that, because maybe all they see too are the negative aspects in our pop culture or in the world media. But you can still bring a little love, bring your heart, and you share what you have, that's positive, and then they can do the same with their culture. And we all just at the end of the day want to be happy and provide for our families and hang out with our friends, and I think we can share that across borders.
We definitely can. It's about the meeting of people. It's always about the meetings of people.
Well, I'm becoming conscious of our time. We've had you for about an hour now. So real quickly, everybody was really interested in just sharing what their favorite songs were.
Absolutely.
From the soundtrack. And for me as a filmmaker, I always listen to music. And for me, music tells a story, especially if I've experienced the music in a movie or in a video game. I'm always replaying that story. So I listen to it, I can see the story that's happening, or even make up new adventures. And the Black Forest, the darkness. For me, that song, I don't know what the inspiration was for that, but when I listen to it, it feels both dark but hopeful. It feels reflective. I feel like I want to listen and then just contemplate the stories in the game or the stories in my life. It really relaxes me, and I become almost in a meditative state when I listen to that one. And I've in some of my videos, I've used it as a closing song for a lot of my YouTube videos, because it just puts me in that kind of a contemplating mood. I don't know where you came up with that, but I love that song.
Thank you. It's another one of the favorites. I really like it too. It has three interesting things with it, that song. It was composed, is one of the few songs that wasn't composed for what it ended up being in. Because that was one of the first songs I composed generally to sort of establish the sound world of Valheim. So it wasn't a place. I'd just been running around the world and getting a feel for it, and some videos, and I played around with composing techniques I had used before. A lot of my art music has this stoic, I call it pillar technique. It's not a technique necessarily, but it's like a stoic procession, and it has the lum, 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 something that fades in or walks. And if we listen to a lot of the art music I've written for recorder quartet, it's in there, that stoic procession. Because I think that it's important to have, not traditions, that's the wrong word, but I think it's things that you come back to that make you feel at home. And I know that in Western culture, even if it can't really be generalized, we have this procession of previous religious ceremonies. And I think that's what that represents for me. It's a link back to tradition, but also to ceremonies. And I think it just found a very good place in Valheim at the start of it. But I also want to, what that track represents for me is melancholy. And immediately, of course, people are going to say, that's not how melancholy is pronounced. The thing is, in Swedish, it's called melancholy, and it sounds almost happy. And because being in a country that's dark for big parts of the year, but also light in summer, very, very light, it's something that we all have experienced. Everybody shares the melancholy of living in Scandinavia, and that is not a bad thing. It's not another way of saying it's a depressed state, but everybody feels a bit of melancholy, and everybody knows that you get out of it, and when the sun comes, it's really nice. So for me, melancholy is a positive. It's this sort of introspective, slightly grey color that everybody feels, and it's okay. And we're going to have good times as well, because everybody knows that always comes. So that is what the Black Forest is for me, is this introspective melancholy. It's happy in its own Scandinavian way.
Introspective. That was the word I was looking for there. It's funny when you did the procession, when you said lum, lum, like it gave me chills in the back of my neck because it reminded me of that song. And that's like the first thing you hear as it starts, and then it goes into it. And I love it. But Gwen, you want to share with one of your favorites?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna I'm gonna say probably one of the favorites that one of your hits. It's the Meadows. But I also like the home song a lot, and I think it's probably just the way I enjoy the game. I find Valheim so relaxing and therapeutic almost, and to play. I'm not really too much into the fighting and the fighting the bosses and all of that. And I think that those songs, the Meadow song and the home song, are just perfect for that setting. You feel relaxed, you feel at home, and that's the feeling that you were talking about, like bringing in those instruments that are old instruments that really are rooted in, I don't know, it just gives you that feeling of coziness of being at home. I don't know how to describe it better, but that's why I think those songs are just the ones that I enjoy having in the background while I play.
Thank you. I really enjoy those two tracks as well, and they are fan favorites for a reason. There's a word or a guideline I had for both of those tracks, and it's a nice place to be for both of them. It's music for a place where you can spend a lot of time. And I'm a big fan of old instruments. When people ask me what music I listen to, I usually say I like choir music from the 17th century and backwards. I also love progressive metal and techno, like electronic dance music. But I love Baroque music. And I've worked a lot with Baroque musicians in Sweden. And they're just the loveliest bunch. Early music musicians and folk musicians are fantastic to work with. And I'm not saying that to sort of say that any other musician in any other genre, anyway, not as fun. But there's just a camaraderie in a nerdy way among these people who've chosen a small subset genre. And I wrote a music piece for Baroque orchestra, and that's where I got to work with all these fantastic instruments. And the instruments in home, it's old. It's a 17th century drum. It's the theorbo again. I think there's a bit of guitar in there, which is the modern thing. And it's old Baroque wooden flute. And I think that does give it. There's that air of authenticity and a sound that you just don't get anywhere else than with those instruments. And for me, my life's quest is going to be integrating the art music tradition I come from into video game music, and then have video game music feed back into the art music world. And that's my home is one of those meeting places.
Yeah, I already kind of mentioned it, but just love the juxtaposition between the relaxfulness of it and the complexity of the music. Yeah, I'm really able to appreciate that, and I could build in the Meadows all day long, and it makes me excited to do chores in my Meadows spaces.
It's I just want to give a shout out to another thing I did. There's a Australian YouTuber called Gamerbrain who is an ABC producer but also a YouTuber, and he made a very hauntingly beautiful, losing the words here, but it's a storytelling piece about the passing of his dad. His dad passed when he was young, and he talks about this whole story and he set it in Valheim as a machinima, but it's a very moving piece of video work, and he commissioned me to write a piece for that. And we talked about what do you want that to be, because the piece is should be a retrospect of the life that you led. So if the Meadows piece in Valheim is this young adventurer that's keen to see what the world is about and contains, this other piece that he commissioned me to, which is called Old Meadows, and it's unofficial Valheim song. It's available on YouTube for the people who want to listen to it. It's an adventurer who's looking back on a life that he or she has led, or they have led, and thinks about what they've done and sees the beauty, but also the melancholy of having that behind them. And it was nice getting to revisit the Meadows feeling, but from a different perspective. So if you haven't heard that already, I recommend searching for, I think Gamer Brain is his name on YouTube, or the song is called Old Meadows. Both watch his movie because it's a very moving piece of video work, and listen to the song. I think you might enjoy it.
You're referring to the video. It's titled "I Quit YouTube for 1 year to Spread My Dad's Ashes in Valheim."
That is the one.
Yeah, Game Brain. Yeah, I watched that video. It's very moving. Yeah, and interesting to know that you did the music for it. No wonder I mean, besides his lovely presentation, yeah, I was really drawn into that.
And he's a lovely person, so it was really fun to work with him. So shout out to him.
Ah, that's wonderful. I'll have to include a link to that here
Yay!
in our description. Well, Urkinus and Rudy, they have similar favorites. Urkinus, do you want to tell us your favorite song?
Yeah, so I really like sailing music. When you're out in the ocean, can't really get enough of it. Relaxing, especially with clear skies, and well, at least up until the serpent comes and ruins everything.
And that's my favorite part. I love the serpent hunting in the game, and when it's nice and peaceful, and then the serpent comes up and it gets more intense. Oh, I got goosebumps just talking about it.
Yeah, I'd love to compose a piece for when you fight the serpent. That would be quite fun, because there were a lot of things when we were doing the soundtrack that I didn't necessarily know was going to come in the game later, so I didn't take that into consideration. But now seeing how people have interacted with sailing and the serpent, I would love to compose more, and hopefully we can get that into the works. Not promising anything, but I felt that the earlier versions of the sailing theme that I did was more sort of like sailing at night more than sailing during the day. I find it hard sometimes with writing happy music, because I feel like if you write music which on the surface is happy, it's easy that it's dancing music. And of course that comes from the Swedish folk music tradition, that when it's summer everybody wants to go and dance, so it's very happy and swinging good music. And then when it's winter and it's snowy outside and you're sitting alone in your cabin or with your family or partner or friend, then that's the introspective music side of the folk music. And I find it really hard to write music that's happy, but genuinely happy, like a serene happiness. But I feel like the Meadows is that. That style of composing happy music came to me in after the passing of my mum. So I think that the epitome of that sort of let's go on an adventure is the sailing music. And again, props to Rickard Svensson for knowing how to steer the ship to get that song, because people love it, and it wouldn't have been as good if that collaboration hadn't been there.
So many great things, and we could probably continue talking for hours and hours. But can you tell us before we close up here just what other projects you're currently working on? Is there anything that you can just share with us? We know that you mentioned earlier that you're working on some Valheim stuff. Are there any other projects that you're enjoying working on, or that might be coming up in the future?
I have to give a think. The problem with the video game world, and this is a constant joke between my brother-in-law and my sister, is the classic one. You say, "Oh, what are you working on at the moment?" And just like, can't tell you. So one thing I've learned, I thought I had two games lined up that I was going to compose the music for, but I've learned that, and my dad has been staunch in saying this, that nothing is true until there's a written contract.
Yeah.
And there wasn't a contract. We were going to write a contract on the first game, and that didn't pan out, so that's not happening. And the second one might just take a while longer. But I do have some fun things in the works. And sadly, well, I haven't signed an NDA with them, but I also don't have a contract yet. So I feel I'm not going to go out and say, hey, I'm going to do this thing, because it's not true until there is a contract. But what I am looking forward to, I want to get back to art music writing again. I'm going to finally mix and master my Requiem to have a digital release at that, because I think that's, for me, an incredibly important project. But I think it's also music that resonates with a lot of people. And when people who've played Valheim who've contacted me on the Discord server and we had chats, and they've said that they've been having tough times in their lives and things happening. I've sent a preview of my track I wrote for my mum, and it's been a bonding experience getting to talk about that and have something that's, it's a piece of music that expresses something, the beauty of life. So that's one thing I'm looking forward to. I'm really looking forward to the concert in April in Stockholm, to get to play there. We're working on another concert with string orchestra at the end of this year, or around Halloween, in my home region. So I'm hoping to get to come and play with that. And we want to you've got to have lofty ideas. We want to do like a Twitch stream around the world, and do a really cool thing about it. So that's what I'm working for and hoping for at the moment. Other than that, I just, at the moment I'm enjoying hanging out with friends I haven't seen in a long time, and with family I haven't seen in a long time. And I think that's going to give me inspiration to kick off the next project. But for anybody who's interested in what's going to happen in the future, Twitter is my main source of information chucking out. So if you follow me at Patrik Jarlestam, Patrik Jarlestam, I'm not difficult to find, I think. And if you also want to look at the woodworking I do, which is my little favorite hobby, I'm on Instagram at the Happy Woodworking Swede.
Oh yeah, I was just going to ask you how can people find you, but you beat me to it. And and you mentioned earlier about the Requiem when you were telling us how it influenced, events in your life influenced it. So it sounds like that it is not currently available anywhere, and it might be in the future. Is that what I got?
Yes, exactly. The problem with getting paid work is that you have to do paid work, or want to do paid work. So because Valheim happened almost as I was wrapping up the Requiem, I didn't really get that time to finish the mixing and the mastering. So I'm going to do a digital release of that soon. And I'm hoping in the coming 1 or 2 months to do that. Hashtag famous last words. But I'm also looking forward to doing some. I've been promising to do Valheim videos about how I composed the music and launch that on my YouTube channel, because that's going to come out on Twitter as well when that's finished. But it's hard. It's hard to do really good videos, as everyone who works with videos knows. So big cred to all of the absolutely fantastic YouTube and video content creators out there, how they work so hard to make such, time-consuming pieces of absolute art.
Yeah, it's funny. I get a lot of questions about how I do certain things in my videos, and if they can learn, or if I could teach them, or what advice I would have. And I say to them, well, become a professional filmmaker for 25 years. And then you can learn to do this kind of stuff. There's no easy, quick shortcut to doing some of this stuff.
No, it's the 10,000 hours.
Yes, the 10,000 hours. Yeah, definitely help. Well, I would invite you to share a piece of the Requiem if you wanted to on the podcast. But if not, we'll definitely look forward to the release when you finally get to it.
I have one track I would love to share, because it is finished, that one, and it's I want to say quickly about the Requiem, because it's a zombie Requiem, which sounds quite funny. It's a good catchy title, but a Requiem is a mass of the dead, and I felt that what happens philosophically when you love someone and they pass away, but then they come back, and how do you relate to each other? Are you the same people? Do you want to be in each other's lives still? Is the dead, from having been dead, are they the same person? So these are the themes I explore in the Requiem, and it's inspired by the French zombie movie. Is it called Le Revenant or Le Retourné? I can't remember which.
I think it's a good question. I would say the first, Le Revenant.
Yes. Because it's a great movie and a great series as well. So that's what the Requiem was inspired by. And the one I will share with you is, like I said, the one inspired by my mum, but it's about different aspects of living with the returned dead. One aspect that comes before this track is about a relationship which is just not working out, but then when the person returns, they're a different person who doesn't carry all of these problems from the previous relationship, so they can sort of enjoy their relationship anew in a strange way. Another aspect is losing someone you absolutely love and they come back someone else who's not the person you lost, and how hard that be. And the third one, which is the one I'll share, is about a person whose loved one didn't return at all, and they didn't even get the chance to experience the happiness and sadness and pain that everybody else is going through. They're just on the outside looking in, and maybe that is the most tragic one of all. And yeah, that's the one I'll share with you all.
Well, thank you so much for sharing all of this and sharing your time with us. It's been wonderful. And I look forward to, the future, projects, music that you do for future projects, and would love to have you on in the future if you're available to talk about those as well.
That would be absolutely lovely. There is one project which I'm hoping to get, which is going to be so much fun musically, because this is, it's sort of returning to the roots of music I heard when I was growing up. So I will. I hope to give you a sneak peek soon.
Yeah, thank you so much, and thanks everyone here for joining me today to interview Patrik. And that'll be it for now. Have fun out there.
Thank you so much everybody. Tack så mycket allihopa. Hoppas ni har en jättefin dag, afton, kväll. Och tack så mycket. Patrik Jarlestam signing out.
And with that, I would like to close the podcast out with this beautiful song that Patrik composed and provided to me to share with you all for this world premiere. The song is entitled My Loss is a Double Loss. Enjoy.
When the others returned, you did not. No shout, no whisper,
That was hauntingly beautiful. Thank you, Patrik, for sharing this with us. Tack så jättemycket. Thank you for listening to Podheim, Jiroc's Valheim podcast. We have new episodes coming out every Friday, and if you enjoyed listening, please support us by subscribing to the podcast on your favorite platform and leave us a rating and a review to help more Vikings find us. We also have a Patreon with perks for supporters like behind-the-scenes discussions, exclusive content, and segments that are edited out of the main podcast, and access to our Valheim gaming servers. If you would like to play on our Valheim servers, join our Discord. The link will be in the description of this episode, along with the Patreon link. There you will find all the information you need to apply to our gaming servers. Thank you to Gwen the Shield Maiden, Viking Urkinus, Rudistic the Guardian, and Thorin, aka Metarune, for being part of this show. I'd like to give a huge shout out to my supporters, some of them on Patreon, the YouTube membership, and the ones who help boost our Discord server. Your support means the world to me and inspires me to make more videos, as well as run a community Discord and multiple Valheim gaming servers. If you enjoy my videos and would like to support my work, join our friendly Discord community and Valheim servers. Links can be found in the description below. Skål!